I will talk about the destruction of the Buddhas of Bamiyan and what it meant for us as the Hazaras and the impact that it had. And the act of this cultural destruction that sent a very dangerous message to the world, that how easily a community can be persecuted and how easily the history of a vulnerable community like the Hazaras can be erased and how easily a community can be targeted. And also the urgent need that we need to advocate for the protection of the remaining sites and our responsibility as a whole on ensuring that it doesn't happen again by being able to utilize the impact that it had worldwide to the cultural heritage. So the Buddhas of Bamiyan were among the most significant artistic and cultural treasure of the ancient civilization. These statues were carved into the cliffs of the Bamiyan Valley in central Afghanistan, built around 6th century. At 55 and 38 meter tall, they were the largest standing Buddhas in the world. Bamiyan was more than just a remote valley. It was a thriving Buddhist center along the Silk Road, where multiple civilizations exchanged knowledge, faith, and artistic influences. These Buddhas were not just religious symbols. They were masterpieces of Gandhara art, reflecting Indian, Persian, and Greek culture and influences, showing the interconnected nature of civilization in Afghanistan. It also showed the artistic and religious development from the 1st to 13th century of ancient Bactria. It also showed the deep history of Afghanistan as a diverse and multicultural crossroads and the deep roots that it connects to Hazara people. Even after Islam came to Afghanistan, the Buddhas remained untouched for centuries. It was respected by Muslim rulers who understood their historical and artistic values. The destruction of Buddhas in 2001 was about extremism. It was about deliberate effort to rewrite history, to erase the past, and that the narrative that did not fit the dominant ethnic group in Afghanistan. Bamiyan was also the symbolic heart of Hazara heritage and authority. The Buddhas stood in Hazara land, a reminder of a diverse past that some sought to erase. This act of cultural vandalism was not just an attack on the statue, it was an attack on Hazara identity, on Hazara history, and the people. The Taliban justified the destruction of the Buddhas by calling them an idol. And they used Islam to justify the destruction of the history, which was about 1,500 years old. But the real reason for the destruction of the Buddhas was to erase Afghanistan's diverse history and the Hazara history. The Buddhas were proof that Afghanistan had not always been under the dominant ethnic group's rigid ideology. It was also a show of power by the Taliban. The destruction was designed to shock the world and display the Taliban's dominance. It was targeting the Hazaras. The Buddhas stood in Bamiyan, the Hazara homeland. Their destruction was a direct attack on the Hazara history and identity. The message was clear. Erase the Buddha, erase the Hazara identity. This act was a blueprint for future cultural destruction worldwide. The destruction of the Buddhas did not start in 2001. Their faces were defaced centuries earlier, likely during the early Afghan dynasties or during the reign of Amir Abdurrahman Khan, because they looked like Hazaras and resembled the Hazara face. This period also marked the beginning of Hazara marginalization and persecution. The rulers who defaced the faces of the Buddhas were the same ones who began pushing Hazaras to the margins, calling us outsiders in our own land, marginalizing the community, dehumanizing the community, which led to the Hazara genocide by Amir Abdurrahman Khan. And so the message even then was clear that erasing the Buddhas meant erasing Hazaras and our claim to Bamiyan. Destroying symbols of the past made it easier, very easy, to rewrite the history, which was a project that was done by the ethnic or the dominant group in Afghanistan. This was a very, very long-term and strategic plan of the dominant group in Afghanistan to start the process of erasure of culture and ethnic erasure, and that continues today under the Taliban regime. The Buddhas that was located in Bamiyan, which is the heartland of the Hazara people, as I mentioned, they were not just statues for us. They were symbols of our identity and historical connection to the roots. Hazaras are not Buddhist today, but they embrace the Buddhas as a part of their cultural identity. Hazara folklore even includes myths about the Buddhas. I'm sure a lot of us have heard the story of Shah Maman Salsal, which is absolutely beautiful. And providing very deep cultural ties, it had a huge impact on the shape the Hazara social manners and etiquettes. And actually, I was reminded that the fact that we sit cross-legged in front of our elders stemmed from that sort of culture. So we have the way that we have the social structure of Hazaras have a very deep connection to Buddhas and Buddhism. And the Taliban, as well as the ethnic dominants who ruled Afghanistan that defaced and destroyed the Buddhas, knew this. And so again, their message was clear, that they wanted to erase Buddha, they wanted to erase our history, and they wanted to erase our future from Afghanistan. So this destruction was more than a cultural destruction. It was a cultural cleansing that led to genocide. The continuation of Hazara genocide and cultural genocide in Afghanistan. Let's just go back to Amir Abdurrahman Khan and the fact that they faced the Buddhas during that time. So the dehumanization of Hazaras started well before then, because to be able to convince an entire group of people that these people are worth killing and that you can do a jihad against them, you need to convince that community that these people are not the same as you. And so during Amir Abdurrahman Khan, we know that he killed about 62% of the Hazaras. The Hazara lands were confiscated. A lot of the Pashtuns or the supporters of Amir Abdurrahman Khan were resettled in our lands. And so when the Taliban came, they pushed the same extremist ideology during 2001, which led about 24 years ago that destroyed the Buddhas. And they also executed Abdul Ali Mazari in 1995. They continued to attack us during the Republic government, but post-2021 is where we are in grave danger. And so even now, we see that there's a continuation of Hazara genocides, and we saw the destruction of the statue of Ali Abdul Ali Mazari when they took over. Again, this is to show the dominance, this is to show that how easily they can erase the Hazaras and Hazara identity if we don't stand against them and if we don't fight. So in 2003, UNESCO designated Bamiyan as a World Heritage Site in danger. There has been some effort, very small effort, to preserve what remains of the Buddhas, to recover fragments from the destroyed statues, and they have worked with some international experts to protect the site from further damage. But unfortunately, that's not enough. And so today, the value of Bamiyan, or the World Heritage Site, still remains in danger. So we have to ask ourselves, is the international law strong enough to be able to protect our cultural heritage sites? And so despite these efforts, other cultural sites still continues to be an effort. The role of UNESCO, or there's been some debates on whether we can, sorry, that was different slides. So the role of UNESCO in international responses, as I said, there's been very little efforts, but nothing has been done. And so there's been some condemnation by the international community, but unfortunately no real action has been taken to be able to protect our identity, to preserve the cultural heritage sites, and to be able to protect the Hazaras, and to listen to our plea to stop Hazara genocide and to stop the cultural genocide. So there has been some questions about whether we should rebuild the Buddhas of Bamiyan, or some arguments have been against it. To be able to rebuild the Buddhas of Bamiyan, it would reclaim and to restore a significant aspect of cultural identity. So reconstructing the Buddhas would symbolize resilience, resistance of cultural erasure, and the reclaiming of history of those who still feel their loss. It would restore not only the monuments, but also a source of identity for the Hazara people and the global community that value cultural heritage. Those who are arguing against this, so they are saying that leaving the site as it is serves as a reminder of what was lost. Keeping the empty niches untouched would stand as a memorial of intolerance and destruction, a permanent testament to the danger of extremism and the irreversible damage caused by cultural genocide. The void itself tells a very powerful story. But despite these arguments or discussion that's going around, I think there is an urgent issue, and that is that the site still remains at risk. There is an ongoing exploitation and looting of artifacts in Bamiyan by the Taliban. And the fact that Taliban has taken power again, we can see this is bringing a further erasure of non-Taliban history and the erasure of Hazara history. There is also environmental degradation, so as the empty niches surrounding cave face risks of collapse. And the rain and the weather has exacerbated this risk. There is also a lack of a strong international protection and funding to safeguard the ground. Unfortunately, after Taliban has taken over, there's almost zero effort to be able to preserve our cultural heritage. And so I'm saying this because I think we need to understand that the destruction of Buddhas in Bamiyan, it truly is a cultural genocide. And yes, we are also fighting for the physical genocide that is taking our lives, as we can see the pictures here. But these things and the destruction of Buddhas in Bamiyan is also as important that we need to fight for, and we need to campaign and advocate for the protection of what is remaining. So as you can see here, so the value of Bamiyan, it's not just the Buddhas of Bamiyan that was a cultural heritage site, but actually the value of Bamiyan as well. And then it holds centuries of histories. And these are a couple of names that we still remain in Bamiyan that we cannot afford to lose. And so we need to really ask the world that they need to act now. So we can protect and restore Bamiyan's remaining historical sites, hold those who are perpetrators accountable for the destruction and the erasure of history, and that we need to campaign for the recognition of cultural genocide at Buddhas of Bamiyan. The lessons that we have learned and moving forward, we have seen what happened when cultural heritage is destroyed. We have seen the consequences of allowing histories to be erased. We need to recognize cultural destruction as a precursor to genocide. Cultural destruction is never just about monuments. It's about erasing people, their identities, and their place in history, as well as their future and the way that it shapes the future. The destruction of the Bamiyan Buddha was a precursor to ongoing violence against the Hazara genocide and the fact that it exacerbated ever since. So we must demand that cultural destruction to be treated as a warning sign of impending human rights violation. We need to ask for strengthening international laws to uphold perpetrators accountable. When extremists destroy cultural heritage, there must be consequences. Existing international law on cultural heritage is incredibly weak and rarely endorsed. We need stronger legal framework to make cultural destruction a punishable crime under the international law. We need to support the local communities to preserve history and heritage. We need to raise awareness among ourselves, the importance of our cultural heritage sites. We need to now safeguard cultural heritage as a human rights issue. Cultural heritage is not just about artifacts, like I said, it's about identity, memory, and survival. We must include cultural protection in global human rights framework. Those of you who are activists, for me, this was a fantastic opportunity to learn a little bit more about my role and what I can do as an activist to advocate for the protection of our cultural heritage sites. So let us commit in protecting our shared past so that the future generations can learn, remember, and move it forward. This was just some of my calls. So the last thing that I want to say is that although the Buddhas have fallen, but their history, their story, and our culture and our people still remains alive, and we are at the forefront of our fight. We genuinely really need to be able to understand and do some research, the value and what it means, and what places like the Bamiyan Valley and other places in Afghanistan that we feel so connected, deeply connected to, what they means to us as a Hazara identity. And those we need to call for their protection, and therefore for the protection of the entire Hazara community in Afghanistan. Thank you. I would like to now ask Aghay Atayi, who has drawn the Buddhas of Bamiyan beautifully, to come up to the stage. Aghay Atayi, اگر ازشان دعوت کنیم که روی صحنه بیایند و رسامی که ایشان کردند.
ما خدمت شما فقط کوتاه مختصر یک چند کلمه دارم. معلومات اساسی و کلی را خواهر عزیز ما به انگلیسی برای شما گفتن و نیاز نیست که زیاد سر از او تبصره کنیم. فقط همین بگیم که مجسمه های بامیان برای کلن عالم بشریت یک معجزه مانند بود که به این معنا که در او اصل و زمان سینه کور مجسمه ها را درست کردن و این بسیار کار دشوار سخت بوده که در او زمانی که نه امکانات بوده نه کدام چیز بوده، این را چطور درست کردن. اینا یک از عجایب دنیا بود در واقع، مثل آثار تاریخی در مصر و جاهای دیگه. و مجسمه های بامیان برای هزاره ها ارزش تاریخی و اجتماعی داشت، ارزش سیاسی داشت. هزاره ها سالهای سال در کنار بودا زندگی کردند و هیچ صدمه به بودا نرساندند و تازه نه که نرساندند بلکه افتخار هم کردند که این ماده منطقه ما همچه یک مجسمه را داریم. شاعرای هزاره در رابطه با بودا شعر سرودند، نویسنده های هزاره در رابطه با بودا قلم زدند، در رابطه با تاریخ بودا، در رابطه با عظمت بودا قلم زدن. و همچنان به اصطلاح رسام ها و نقاش ها یکی مثل من حقیر هم ما وظیفه خود و اصطلاح مدین خود ادا کردیم در رابطه با بودا. ما خود 3 تا تابلو رو کشیدیم برای در رابطه با بامیان. یکی از شهر بامیان بود که تقریبا 30 سال پیش در اتحادیه هزاره یک شهر بامیان بسیار کلان بود. امور ما در اونجا نصب کرده بودیم، بسیار کلان بود، تقریبا همین قدر بود. و یک بودای دیگه که 2 متر در طولش بود و 160 سانت عرضش بود، او رو ما کشیده بودم که از او مثلا برای تظاهراتی که در رابطه با وقتی که بودا را انفجار دادن و تخریب کردن از او استفاده کردن و به محافل مختلف استفاده میشد. اینی تابلو را که میبینین عزیزان، این با رنگ اکرول کار شده روی کانوس و این ما به سفارش آقای حبیب پیمان برای همین محفل هفته پیش کشیده. ما خود را نقاش نمیگم، نیستم، ولی باش قلم میزنیم در هرچی باد. امیدوار هستم که مورد پسند و لطف و عنایت شما قرار بگیرد. تشکر.
سپاس آقای عطایی. Thank you so much. For those of you who may not have understood, he painted this last week for the purpose of this. He has done other painting of the Buddhas of Bamiyan in resistance to the destructions that we saw in 2001. So we truly appreciate the effort and this collective effort to be able to ensure that the history, even though they try to erase it, lives on in our hearts, in our minds, in places, in canvas like this. تشکر بسیار زیاد آقای عطایی. به ما گفتن که فرصت سوال جواب هم هست. اگر دوستایی که سوال داشته باشد در انگلیسی کنن بهتر است. بفرمایید برار. پاسخ ایست که مثلا پسکی موت بودای بامیانی که در قرن 60 جور کرده بودن امکانش نیست، ولی میتونه راههای دیگه هست که بتونه با یک طریقی ریکانستراکت کنه. متاسفانه فعلا تا جایی که من خبر داشته باشم مگه قومایی که معلومات بیشتر داره هیچ پروژه‌ای نیست در بخش کار کنه. حتی تا حال فاندم این نیست که بتونه حتی پروتکت کنه بوداره یا بامیانه. یعنی مالی هم مثلا والی بامیان در او تخریب کاری کیوز و جاهایی که ولی هست سر راه هست. So it means that there are absolutely zero protection and there are no programs or processes in place to be able to protect, let alone reconstruct it. But of course, during the Republic, there was a lot of discussions around whether we should be left alone. And if you remember, there are some, just right there as well. So we have a light, and there were other ways that they were trying to preserve it. There are other ways trying to showcase. But right now, unfortunately, there are none. And that is why events like this are so important, that we raise awareness and that we do something about it. This is our history. This belongs to us. We need to start owning that.
آیا در مناطق دیگه هزاری که تاسارهای باستانی وجود داره کارش شده یا نشده؟ اگر شده چیست؟ اگر نشده چی برنامه قرار باشه به نظر کشید؟
The Buddhists had a significant role. So there's about 1.6 billion Buddhists around the world. It reflected a civilization that existed in the early centuries, 1 to 13th century. And if we're facing danger, if a place like this faces danger, there are almost no other mechanisms or no other programs exists to be able to look at other parts of Hazaristan and other cultural heritage sites that we have to be able to protect and preserve those. All of them are in danger. This is a significance to the world, and that's why we're focusing on it, to use it as a foundation to start to work and to protect other cultural heritage sites as well.